Tonight we want to do a panel discussion of sorts, and I want to introduce to you two of the folks that are going to be speaking tonight. It's an incredible opportunity to understand international and refugee work. I was so thankful for Sammy's talk this morning. He led a workshop earlier in the week that I was a part of, and feel like what's going on in America is we're at a critical moment when we need to love people, not just black, white, and brown, but those from all over our world who are being marginalized, rejected, scoffed at, even hurt in our cities. And it's the Christians among us who must lead the way. I was so encouraged a few months ago when there was sort of a refugee reaction in Dallas, Texas, how many of the churches came together to pray. Across the whole city, the church came together to say, we're not going to stand for prejudice of any kind. And so we felt like tonight would be a great opportunity to let you understand more about this important issue. We have two folks coming tonight. First, I want to introduce John Parsons. John is, to my right, is my friend from seminary. He is the regional director of World Relief, and they have resettled thousands and thousands of refugees across America, and his work is primarily in this region. And we've remained friends through the years. And John is going to talk about the work of resettlement and the issues that are around that as people from other foreign nations come to live here, and is also some of the way that you can make a difference. Dr. Samira Israti Page is an amazing woman who some of you may know. She has created the Gateway of Grace Ministries. She came to the United States as a refugee and as a Muslim. In the grace of God, he brought her to faith. And we celebrate the fact that this woman not only celebrates her newfound faith in Jesus Christ, but also she came to say we need to help the churches understand. So this ministry that she is a part of, she'll tell you more about that, has exploded to help churches understand what their role is, what you can do to make a difference. So they will each have about 10 minutes to talk about their work and their views, and then we're going to open it up as a panel for about 25 or so more minutes. So John, if you'll begin, we did that on purpose to the way we're stacking the information. John, we're not letting him go first because he's my friend. I just want you to know that. But John, if you will, come talk to us about your work and your concern for what's going on.
Thank you, Jimmy. During the worship, the Lord just gave me a thought, and I wrote it down. It may be for someone here, it may be for everyone. Be broken for Jesus. He'll put you together again, help you show others himself, even when they are broken. The refugee work in 10 minutes. Here we go. Can you imagine what it takes to happen in your life to get near a raging sea and get on a boat like that and have to journey across the Mediterranean Sea into Europe? Can you imagine one wave would do to that? Think of the thoughts and the anxiety of those people escaping one part of the world into an area in Europe where their future is unknown. In 1975, I was part of a refugee fleeing group. I got the first-hand experience fleeing Vietnam when Vietnam fell. I remember going down a road with 1 million people, running, walking, bikes, motorcycles, you couldn't believe it, in every shape and size, and fleeing gunfire and different things that were happening. I ended up losing everything I had except my ping pong paddle. There's a special tie there. Anyway, I had it in a field pack. This is what Europe is kind of experiencing. Can you imagine 4 to 6 million people displaced, fleeing to find a place? never knowing if they can ever go home. And this is the Syrian cause. And as a result of that situation, there's been a lot of media that's taken place to be able to push both the positive and the negative side of what's taking place in Syria. I kind of put this, you're in a ministry place as Christians. You might feel very secure, and sometimes I feel like the goat, where it sure feels solid where I'm standing. But you know, I think that if he stepped back and took a little different view, he would be less stable. When I see this, it reminds me of where I need to be in walking with the Lord and trusting Him. Now, one of the things I want to emphasize in the refugee work is, in Matthew 25, Jesus describes 6 groups of people that the righteous ministered to. You may remember these: the hungry, the thirsty, the stranger, people without clothes. I've yet to kind of wonder how to deal with that one. 5, the sick and the imprisoned. Now, if God is dealing in your heart and life and you're actively involved in that, then my desire for you is to invest in that part of the kingdom. But if you've been asking God, is there something else you need to be doing, or is there some dimension of ministry that you have, I would like for you to consider the stranger, the alien, the foreigner. So I want you to kind of ponder that possibility. Who is a refugee? Now, I want you to know, you're going to see another slide in just a minute. In the world, there are approximately 232 million migrants, or what we call displaced people. They're not refugees. They don't fit the legal definition which is required for somebody to be a refugee. Let me read it for you. A refugee is a person who is having a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion, is outside the country of his nationality, and is unable, or owing to such fear, is unwilling to avail themselves of protection of that country. So many people, the word refugee is used in a broad sense, but it's not the legal term that many of us have to do and deal with. Every refugee, every person that becomes a refugee has to be determined to fit this definition. If not, they're a displaced person. So in the world right now, across the world, there are millions of people that's been displaced, but they're not refugees. You know how many refugees there are? About 70 million. 70 million refugees. Now, in a normal year, how many refugees do you think get to come to the United States? Out of that 70 million, not a lot, a little bit more, 70,000. 70,000 out of 70 million. Okay? Again, this is 232 million people that have officially been displaced. And you know what displaces them? Sometimes low income, persecution, natural disasters, high unemployment, war, joining relatives. But remember, the definition of refugee is they have to have a fear of being targeted because of their race, their religion, their nationality, being a member of a social group or a political group. So it's critical that when overseas, when they're processing, they get this. And the reason why I make an emphasis of this is there's a question of, well, why should we help everybody that's been fleeing their country? And the answer is we can't, and we don't. But we do reach out and help those that's been determined at the highest need, those that have the most well-founded fear. This right here is the different areas of the world, and you may not be able to read it because of the print, but it lists the countries that are of refugees, and you can see the kind of spots. And right now, the largest move of refugees in the world since World War II is taking place right now. You are living in the middle of an incredible crisis. What are we going to do? What should we do? This right here categorizes nations that oppress their peoples and will most likely produce refugees in the future. And as you look at it, you see North Korea, Iraq, and on down the line, Afghanistan, Syria, and right now we know the millions that are involved in refugees. The top 15 countries that receive refugees, the United States is number one. Again, we try to receive about around 70,000 refugees. The United States resettles less than half of 1% of the refugees' population. In other words, even though we do a lot, it's the number that is so tiny. Now this is a contrast. I don't know how well you can see this, but on the left, this is a picture of a street in Syria in 2011. Notice what that street looks like in 2014. That's representative of most every street in some of the cities. It's quite shocking. But the vast majority of refugees have fled, and now the country of Jordan is full. This would be a typical site of a little kid in one of the refugee camps in Jordan. This just gives you a picture of what Syrians look like. They don't look much different than we do. In fact, if I ran across them on the bus, I might not recognize where they're from. That's one of the refugee camps. Can you imagine losing your home, losing your country, losing all that you have, and you probably have one bag of luggage, and they flee to this location? Well, how do they get from there to here? Well, there are 9 agencies in the United States that have agreed with the United States Department of State to have an agreement to assist refugees when they come. Now, they go through a security clearance and vetting. The average stay in the world in a refugee camp is 15 to 17 years. Can you imagine living in a refugee camp? That's the housing. Every night, people live there in that situation. The uniqueness about this is a Syrian group, and they put the cross to identify themselves as Christians on there. What can you do? What can I do? Well, we could probably get into questions in a little bit, Jimmy. Be a friend, be a mentor, a cultural advisor, an ESL. Did you know you're a professional in English? Many of the people would love to have you practice a sentence and be able to go over words that are very difficult to pronounce. It's also fun to try to learn some of the words of another culture. I work on Vietnamese. My wife, I lived and worked in a refugee camp in 1975 and married a young lady back then, and we've been married 39 years, and she's from Vietnam, 4'9", 87 pounds. She's pretty tough. Help to provide these, and then co-sponsor, that's good. Volunteer hours, you can help with people with goods and services in their house. You can co-sponsor a newly arrived refugee family. We had a family, I'll share this example. We had a mother and daughter come last night. In fact, this week, our agency, we have 7 families arriving this week. And last night, a mother and daughter came, and when they saw the United States, they left the airport, one look at what was here, and they were absolutely struck with fear. They were afraid to go anywhere. They were afraid of everything. I was telling somebody earlier, if you had me go teach a class of toddlers, I think I would be scared to death. You know, fear grips us in almost any situation that we volunteer or reach out. And when we come with a brokenness in our lives that we know what it's like to be emptied, we're able to share of ourselves to that. The resettlement agencies bring these refugees here, and we have given a very limited time to help them find jobs and get an apartment. And when refugees arrive, they take one look at an apartment, and even the most meager apartment, they're stunned, because many of them have been living in tents, either made of plastic or of some material. I share this not to make you feel guilt. Those of you who, it creates gratefulness in my heart to be able to be with my family intact. Can you imagine having lost 2 of your children and maybe your husband, and you're a single mom with a couple of other kids, put in a refugee camp knowing that they're going to be there for years waiting to be able to process out, not knowing where you're going to go. Yeah. For the few that do come to the United States and come to the Dallas area, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, or wherever you live in the state of Texas, there are things changing in politics and the issues of immigration that are incredible. Let me end with one quick Bible passage. The last parable that Jesus told before he introduced the example of the separation of the sheep and goats was the talents. And it was a story of a owner giving 3 servants talents. Now that was a financial sum of money, and it was quite a lot. 1 5, 1 2, and 1 1 talent. The 5 worked hard, doubled it. The 2 worked hard, doubled it. And the 1 buried his because he was afraid the master was too tough. He played it safe. He didn't want to lose it. In fact, he told his master, "Master, I know you're a tough guy. You manage, you expect a lot. And I didn't want to lose it. So I have it here. Here's back." And he was afraid to risk. I want to encourage you today, whatever the other things you've heard here at this conference, consider the refugee ministry, to reach out and look at someone in their eyes and see the eyes of Christ staring back at you, and the difference that you can make in the whole world. I just call out to you in that and say that don't be like the one with 1 talent that was afraid to take the risk, and he paid the price. Blessings to you for the ministries that God leads you. Let me repeat. Be broken for Jesus. He will put you together again and help you show others himself, even in the midst of their brokenness. Blessings to you.